The alley reeked of despair, a sour mix of rotting trash and forgotten dreams. Ethan Caldwell, his chef's jacket still crisp despite a grueling night at La Belle Étoile, paused at the sight of a boy curled against a dumpster, shivering in a threadbare hoodie. Those eyes, haunted, hollow, yet fiercely alive, locked onto Ethan's, pulling him into a moment that would change everything. It was 2015, and Philadelphia's winter bit harder than usual. Ethan, 28, had just finished a 12-hour shift at the upscale French restaurant where he'd clawed his way up from line cook to sous chef. His life was a whirlwind of beurre blanc and ambition, but the boy in the alley stopped him cold. He couldn't have been more than 16, all sharp cheekbones and defiance, clutching a cardboard sign that read, "Hungry." Anything helps. Ethan's heart twisted. He'd seen plenty of homeless folks. Philly's streets were no stranger to suffering, but this kid was different. There was a spark in him, a stubborn refusal to break. "Hey," Ethan called softly, crouching to meet the boy's gaze. "You like chicken?" The boy's name, he'd learned, was Lucas, and he hadn't eaten in 2 days. Ethan didn't think twice. He ducked back into the restaurant, grabbed a to-go box of cocoa vin, and handed it over with a bottle of water. Lucas devoured it, his hands trembling as he scooped the rich, savory dish into his mouth. Ethan watched, a lump in his throat. He didn't know why he cared so much, but he did. Over the next few weeks, Ethan made it a habit. Every night after service, he'd find Lucas in the alley or nearby, always with a warm meal. Sometimes it was duck confit, sometimes just a sandwich, but Lucas never turned it down. They talked, haltingly at first. Lucas was guarded, his story trickling out in fragments. He'd been kicked out by his parents after coming out as gay. The streets were his home now, and trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. Ethan, who'd come out at 19 and faced his own share of rejection, felt a pang of recognition. He didn't push, didn't pry, just kept showing up with food and a quiet presence. One night, under a flickering street lamp, Lucas looked up from a plate of ratatouille and said, "Why do you do this? You don't even know me." Ethan shrugged, his breath visible in the cold. "Because I see you." Lucas's eyes softened, and for the first time, he smiled, a small, fragile thing that made Ethan's chest ache. As spring bloomed, so did their unlikely friendship. Ethan learned Lucas loved art, sketching on scraps of paper with a pencil he kept tucked in his sleeve. In return, Ethan shared stories of his kitchen life, the chaos and beauty of creating something from nothing. He started sneaking Lucas into the restaurant's back room during slow hours, letting him wash dishes for extra cash. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Ethan saw potential in Lucas, a fire that refused to be snuffed out, and he wasn't about to let it die in an alley. But life, as it often does, had other plans. One night, Lucas didn't show. Ethan waited, food in hand, but the alley was empty. Days turned to weeks, and Lucas was gone. Ethan checked shelters, asked around, but no one knew anything. The boy who'd become a quiet part of his life had vanished, leaving only a sketch of a chef's hat tucked into Ethan's locker with a scrawled, "Thank you." Ethan kept it, a reminder of the kid who'd gotten under his skin. Years passed. Ethan rose to executive chef, his name now whispered in Philly's food scene. La Belle Étoile earned a Michelin star, and Ethan's days blurred into a frenzy of menus, critics, and pressure. He dated here and there, but nothing stuck. His heart was too restless, too tethered to the grind. Still, he never forgot Lucas. The sketch stayed pinned in his office, a quiet ghost of a connection he couldn't explain. In 2020, an envelope arrived at the restaurant, addressed to Ethan in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a wedding invitation, gold embossed and elegant, requesting his presence at a ceremony in New York. The name on the card stopped him cold, Lucas Harper. Ethan's breath caught. Was this his Lucas, the boy from the alley? There was no RSVP number. Just a note. You're the reason I'm here. Please come. Ethan's hands shook as he read it again. What did it mean? And why? After all these years. Was Lucas reaching out now? He booked a train to New York, his mind racing. The invitation felt like a lifeline to a past he'd never fully let go. As the city skyline came into view, Ethan's heart pounded with questions. Who was Lucas now? What had happened to him? And what was the shocking reveal hinted at in the invitation's cryptic note? He stepped off the train, the weight of 5 years heavy on his shoulders, unaware that the answers would upend everything he thought he knew about love, redemption, and second chances. New York buzzed with a frenetic energy Ethan wasn't used to. Philly had its grit, its soul, but Manhattan was a beast, shiny, relentless, and overwhelming. He clutched the wedding invitation as he navigated the crowded streets to the venue, a chic rooftop garden in Brooklyn with views of the skyline that made his heart skip. The air was warm, June sunlight filtering through string lights and blooming roses. Ethan, in a tailored navy suit, felt out of place among the polished guests, his chef's hands calloused and scarred from years of burns and knife slips. He scanned the crowd, searching for Lucas. 5 years had passed. Would he even recognize him? The boy he'd known was all sharp edges and survival. But the man who'd sent this invitation clearly moved in different circles now. Ethan's eyes landed on a figure near the altar, tall and lean, with sandy hair swept back and a smile that radiated quiet confidence. It was Lucas, unmistakably, but transformed. His eyes, once shadowed with hunger, now sparkled with purpose. He wore a tailored tux, laughing with a group of friends, and Ethan's chest tightened with a mix of pride and something deeper, something he couldn't name. The ceremony hadn't started yet, so Ethan lingered near a table laden with hors d'oeuvres, trying to blend in. A young woman in a floral dress approached, her smile warm. "You must be Ethan," she said, extending a hand. "I'm Mia, Lucas's friend. He's been talking about you nonstop." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "He has," Mia nodded, her eyes twinkling. "You're kind of a legend to him." The chef who saved his life. Ethan's throat tightened. He didn't feel like a savior, just a guy who'd shared some meals. Mia led him to Lucas, who turned and froze when their eyes met. For a moment, time collapsed. Ethan saw the boy from the alley, but also someone new, a man who'd fought his way to something better. "Ethan," Lucas said, his voice thick with emotion. They hugged, a fierce, wordless embrace that said everything 5 years apart couldn't erase. "You came," Lucas whispered. "I wasn't sure you would." They stepped back, and Ethan took him in. Lucas was 21 now, his frame filled out, his posture steady. "You look incredible," Ethan said, meaning it. Lucas laughed, a little shy. "You don't look so bad yourself, Chef." There was a warmth in his voice, a familiarity that made Ethan's heart ache. They caught up in snatches. Lucas had gotten off the streets, earned a GED, and was now studying art at NYU, thanks to a scholarship. He'd built a life, piece by piece, but he never forgot the meals that kept him going. The wedding was for Lucas's best friend, Mia, but Lucas had insisted on inviting Ethan. "You're the reason I'm here," he said again, echoing the note. Ethan wanted to ask what he meant, but the ceremony started, and they took their seats. As vows were exchanged, Ethan stole glances at Lucas, who watched with a quiet intensity. There was something unspoken in his gaze, a weight Ethan couldn't decipher. After the vows, Lucas pulled him aside to the rooftop's edge, the city glittering below. "I need to tell you something," Lucas said, his voice low. "But not here." "After the reception?" "Okay," Ethan nodded, his stomach twisting with anticipation. The reception was a blur of toasts, laughter, and dancing, but Ethan's mind was on Lucas. They talked more, reminiscing about Philly, the alley, the sketches. Lucas showed him a tattoo on his wrist, a tiny chef's hat, inked in black. "For you," he said simply. Ethan's heart stuttered. He didn't know what to say, so he just squeezed Lucas's shoulder, feeling the connection spark again. As the night wound down, Lucas led Ethan to a quiet corner of the garden. The air was thick with the scent of roses and possibility. "I was in a dark place back then," Lucas started, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "After my parents kicked me out, I thought I was nothing. But you saw me. You gave me more than food, Ethan. You gave me hope." Ethan's chest ached, but Lucas wasn't done. "There's something else. The reason I invited you here, it's not just about the wedding." Ethan's breath hitched. Lucas turned to him, his eyes searching. "I've spent 5 years trying to become someone worthy of you. Not just as a friend." But he trailed off, vulnerability raw in his voice. Ethan's mind reeled. Was Lucas saying what he thought? The spark between them, the one Ethan had buried under years of work and doubt, flared to life. But before he could respond, Lucas's phone buzzed, pulling him away for a moment. "We'll talk later," Lucas promised, leaving Ethan standing there, heart pounding, questions burning. The night ended with a promise to meet the next day. Ethan returned to his hotel, the city's hum a faint echo of his racing thoughts. Lucas's words replayed in his mind, each one heavy with meaning. What was this shocking reveal? Was it about Lucas's feelings, or something bigger? As Ethan stared out at the Manhattan skyline, he felt the weight of 5 years crashing into the present, pulling him toward a truth he wasn't sure he was ready to face. The next morning, Ethan met Lucas at a small cafe in the West Village, its walls lined with local art that reminded Ethan of Lucas's old sketches. Lucas was already there, sipping coffee, his expression a mix of nerves and determination. Ethan slid into the booth, his heart still tangled from last night's almost confession. The air between them crackled, heavy with unspoken words. "I owe you the truth," Lucas said, setting his mug down. "All of it." Ethan leaned forward, every nerve on edge. Lucas's story poured out, raw and unfiltered. After disappearing from Philly, he'd hitchhiked to New York, chasing a rumor about a shelter that helped queer kids. It wasn't easy. There were nights he slept in doorways, days he went hungry again, but he found the shelter, and they connected him with a mentor who saw his talent. Art became his lifeline, each sketch a step away from the streets. He'd clawed his way to stability, but the memory of Ethan's kindness kept him grounded. "You were my anchor," Lucas said, his voice breaking. Every time I wanted to give up, I thought of you. The way you looked at me, like I wasn't invisible. Ethan's eyes stung. He'd never known the impact of those meals, those quiet moments. He reached for Lucas's hand, a reflex, and Lucas didn't pull away. Their fingers laced together, and for a moment, the world shrank to just them. But Lucas's story wasn't done. There's something else, he said, his voice dropping. I didn't just invite you to say thank you. I've been in love with you for years. The words hit Ethan like a freight train. He'd felt the connection, the pull, but hearing it out loud was different. Lucas's eyes were wide, vulnerable, waiting for a response. Ethan's mind raced. 5 years. A kid who'd been a stranger. Now a man confessing love. It was too much, too fast, and yet it felt right. I don't know what to say, Ethan admitted, his voice hoarse. I cared about you, Lucas. I still do. But this, he gestured between them, overwhelmed. Lucas nodded, his expression softening. I know it's a lot. I just needed you to know. You don't have to say anything now. They sat in silence, hands still clasped, the weight of Lucas's confession settling between them. The day unfolded in a haze of connection. They walked through Central Park, talking about everything and nothing, Lucas's art, Ethan's kitchen, the dreams they'd both chased. Ethan felt himself falling, not just for the man Lucas had become, but for the possibility of something more. Yet doubt lingered. He was 33 now, established, while Lucas was just starting out. Could this work? Was it fair to either of them? That evening, Lucas invited Ethan to his tiny apartment, a walk-up cluttered with canvases and paint tubes. On one wall hung a painting, a vibrant, abstract rendering of a chef in a bustling kitchen. Unmistakably Ethan. I painted this my first year at NYU, Lucas said. It's you? The way I saw you. Ethan's heart swelled, but the questions persisted. What did Lucas want? A mentor? A friend? Or something deeper? Riskier? As night fell, they cooked together, nothing fancy. Just pasta with a simple sauce. But it felt like a ritual. Lucas laughed as Ethan critiqued his knife skills. And Ethan marveled at how easy it was. How natural. Over dinner, Lucas shared more about his life now, his friends, his art, his hopes. But he also spoke of fear, of wondering if he'd ever be enough. Ethan recognized that fear, the echo of his own insecurities. You're more than enough, he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. They stood at the counter, dishes forgotten, the space between them shrinking. Lucas leaned in, hesitant, and Ethan met him halfway. The kiss was soft, tentative, but it carried years of longing, of what-ifs and might-have-beens. When they pulled back, Ethan's head spun. I don't know where this goes, he said, voice low. Lucas smiled. Steady. We'll figure it out. Together. But the next day, as Ethan prepared to return to Philly, Lucas dropped another bombshell. There's one more thing, he said at the train station, his eyes bright with nerves. The wedding, it wasn't just Mia's. I'm engaged, too. Ethan's world tilted. Engaged? To whom? And where did that leave them after last night's kiss? Lucas's face was a mix of hope and fear, waiting for Ethan's reaction, as the train's whistle signaled the end of their moment and the start of something far more complicated. Ethan's train ride back to Philly was a blur of confusion and yearning. Lucas's words, I'm engaged, too, echoed like a drumbeat in his skull. Who was Lucas engaged to? Why hadn't he mentioned it sooner? And what did that kiss mean? The one that had set Ethan's heart on fire only to leave him reeling? He stared out the window, the countryside streaking by, and tried to piece together the puzzle of Lucas's life. The boy he'd fed in an alley was now a man with a fiancée, a career, a future. So where did Ethan fit? Back in Philly. The restaurant demanded his focus, but his mind was elsewhere. La Belle Étoile was busier than ever, with critics circling and a new menu launch looming. Yet every quiet moment brought Lucas's face into sharp relief, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the warmth of his hand, the weight of his confession. Ethan hadn't responded to the engagement bombshell. He'd just nodded, hugged Lucas, and boarded the train. Now, regret gnawed at him. He should have asked more, said more. Instead, he was back to his old life, haunted by a kiss and a question mark. A week later, Lucas texted, "Can we talk? I'm coming to Philly." Ethan's heart leapt, then sank. He wanted to see Lucas, but the thought of facing his fiancée or the truth of their relationship felt like a knife's edge. They agreed to meet at a quiet park near the restaurant, a place where cherry blossoms bloomed in spring, now lush with summer green. Lucas arrived alone, his expression a mix of hope and hesitation. "I owe you an explanation," he said, sitting on a bench beside Ethan. The story came out in a rush. Lucas's fiancée, Ryan, was a grad student he'd met at NYU. They'd bonded over art and shared struggles, both queer kids who'd faced rejection. Ryan was kind, steady, and had proposed 6 months ago. Lucas had said yes, caught up in the stability Ryan offered. But seeing Ethan at the wedding had stirred something deeper, something Lucas couldn't ignore. "I thought I could move forward," he said, his voice cracking. "But then I saw you, and it all came back. What I felt then, what I feel now." Ethan's head spun. "So what are you saying? You're engaged. But you kissed me." Lucas flinched, guilt flashing across his face. "I know it's messy. I didn't plan this. I've loved you for so long. Ethan, you were my hero, my safe place. And now you're here, and I don't know what to do." Ethan wanted to be angry, but all he felt was ache for Lucas, for himself, for the timing that never seemed right. They walked through the park, the tension thick between them. Ethan shared his own truth. He'd never stopped thinking about Lucas, even after he vanished. The sketch in his office, the meals he still cooked with Lucas in mind, it all pointed to a connection he'd buried under work and fear. "I don't know if I can be what you need," Ethan admitted. "But I want to try." Lucas stopped, his eyes searching Ethan's. "Even with Ryan in the picture?" Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. "If you're honest with me." With him, the next few weeks were a whirlwind. Lucas returned to New York, promising to talk to Ryan. Ethan threw himself into the restaurant, but every dish he plated felt like a love letter to Lucas. They texted constantly, their conversations a mix of flirtation and fear. Lucas was torn, unraveling his engagement while grappling with his feelings for Ethan. Ethan, meanwhile, wrestled with his own doubts. Could he trust Lucas's heart? Was he ready to upend his life for a love that felt both inevitable and impossible? One night, Lucas called, his voice shaky. "I told Ryan everything. He's hurt, but he understands. We're done." Ethan's heart soared, then plummeted. Lucas was free, but at what cost? "Come to Philly," Ethan said. Impulsive, Stay with me. Let's figure this out. Lucas agreed. And 2 days later, he arrived with a duffel bag and a nervous smile. They stood in Ethan's small apartment, the air charged with possibility. No more secrets, Lucas said, stepping closer. Ethan nodded, pulling him into a kiss that felt like a promise. But love, Ethan was learning, wasn't a straight line. As they navigated their new reality, Lucas crashing on his couch, their days filled with stolen glances and late-night talks, Ethan sensed Lucas holding back. There was still something unsaid, a shadow in his eyes. One evening, as they chopped vegetables side by side, Lucas set down his knife. "There's one last thing I need to tell you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's about the wedding. And why I really invited you." Ethan's heart stopped. The reveal was coming, and he wasn't sure he was ready. Ethan's apartment was quiet, save for the hum of the fridge and the soft clink of knives on the cutting board. Lucas's words hung in the air, heavy with the promise of truth. Ethan braced himself, his hands still on the counter, the half-chopped carrots forgotten. "What is it, Lucas?" he asked, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. Lucas took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the floor. "The wedding, it wasn't just Mia's. It was supposed to be mine, too." A double wedding. Ethan's world tilted again. A double wedding? Lucas had planned to marry Ryan that day. In the same ceremony as Mia, the revelation cut deep, sharper than any kitchen knife. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ethan asked, his voice raw. Lucas looked up, tears brimming. "I couldn't. I saw you, and everything I thought I wanted fell apart. I couldn't go through with it. Not when I realized how I felt about you." The truth spilled out. Lucas had planned the double wedding as a celebration of love and stability, a way to anchor his new life. But seeing Ethan, the man who'd saved him years ago, unraveled everything. He'd called off his engagement to Ryan that night, unable to deny the pull toward Ethan. "You were my first love," Lucas said, his voice breaking. "I didn't know it then. Not fully. But I know it now. I invited you to the wedding to thank you, but also because I needed to see you. To know if this," he gestured between them, "was real." Ethan's heart was a battlefield, hurt, hope, and love clashing. He wanted to be angry, to demand why Lucas had kept this secret. But the vulnerability in Lucas's eyes stopped him. Instead, he stepped closer, cupping Lucas's face. "It's real," he said softly. "But we need to do this right. No more surprises." Lucas nodded, leaning into Ethan's touch, and they stood there, foreheads pressed together, breathing in the weight of their shared truth. The next few months were a dance of rebuilding. Lucas moved to Philly, enrolling in a local art program while working part-time at a gallery. Ethan, still juggling the demands of La Belle Étoile, made space for Lucas in his life. They cooked together, laughed together, fought sometimes, but always came back to each other. Ethan learned to trust again, and Lucas learned to let go of his past fears. They were imperfect, but they were real. One evening, as autumn painted Philly in shades of gold, Lucas took Ethan to the park where they'd reconnected. Under the same cherry blossom trees, now bare, Lucas pulled out a small canvas. It was a painting of them, Ethan in his chef's jacket, Lucas with a sketchbook, their hands entwined against the city skyline. "This is us," Lucas said, his voice steady. "I want this, Ethan. Forever." It wasn't a proposal. Not yet. But it was a promise. One Ethan felt in his bones. They didn't rush. They built their life slowly, deliberately, savoring each moment. Ethan introduced Lucas to his kitchen crew, who teased him mercilessly but welcomed Lucas like family. Lucas's art began to sell, his name gaining traction in Philly's creative scene. Together, they hosted pop-up dinners, blending Ethan's food with Lucas's art, each event a celebration of their shared journey. Years later, at a quiet ceremony in that same park, Ethan and Lucas exchanged vows. The guest list was small: friends, colleagues, and Mia, who'd become a fierce supporter of their love. As they said, "I do," Ethan thought back to the alley, to the boy with haunted eyes and the meals that changed everything. Lucas, holding his hand, whispered, "You fed me when I was starving. You saved me." Ethan smiled, his heart full. We saved each other. Their story wasn't just about love, but about redemption, resilience, and the power of a single act of kindness. The boy from the alley had become a man who'd found his way, and the chef who'd fed him had found his heart. As they danced under the stars, the city humming around them, Ethan knew this was the reveal that mattered most. Love, hard-won and true, was worth every risk.